Hi, my name is Mark Crawley and welcome to Diversity Connect. Today we're going to talk about alternative application methods with this very clickbaity line of "Is the CV finished?" Just to put you out of your suspense, no, I don't think it is, but we are going to look at some other application methods today and some things that we're maybe seeing. Now, when we talk around these are things that that we've maybe seen used at different organizations and from different individuals. We just want obviously the caveat to be that these may not be suitable for all organizations and companies, and maybe something that an organization is not quite ready for or doesn't offer at the moment. But yeah, I thought it was a good idea to maybe showcase some things that we're seeing, because with regard to neuro-inclusivity, it's really important going forward that there is organizations think a little bit differently about how they qualify skills, about how they create a candidate and job seeker experience. So again, this is important topic to bring up and see where we are. So let's have a look at a few of the points here that are quite prevalent to this topic, right? So traditional CVs can obviously be very challenging for neurodivergent job seekers, and they rely on things like linear formatting, self-promotion, and navigating these sort of social professional norms that don't always align with every individual's strengths or communication style. And I think what concerns me a little bit here is, you think about the amount of talent that just based around the process of sending a CV, or the way self-promotion is sometimes so important during interviews, how much talent is not getting into organizations. And that's not just obviously incredibly frustrating and damaging for the neurodivergent community, but it's also a massive loss for organizations and companies, right? So this idea of traditional CVs is one that I think over time organizations will start to look at, and there are some progressive companies looking at things like video applications, etc. So many employers and specialist organizations are developing and looking at neurodivergent friendly alternatives to help candidates present their skills effectively. Now, again, talking very honestly, I'd say a very large percentage of companies are still quite reliant on the cover sheet, application process, and CVs, and the adjustments in interview in terms of time and format and those type of things, that tends to be where the adjustments are. Actually adjusting the way you apply for the role in the first place is something that's I would say it needs a little bit of work. It really does. It's definitely in its infancy at the moment. So, but let's have a look at what alternatives there may be, right? And this is us looking forward to the future here and hoping that all organisations will be able to offer a variety of application methods outside of the CV. So, for example, showcasing, right? So you look at something like GitHub at the moment, where you can showcase your work, you can showcase your technology, you can showcase your coding. Something like GitHub is great because it's becoming quite standard within the application process for technical roles in a lot of organizations, particularly where you have to showcase code, etc., like in areas like Python and C# and a few other areas, right? So having this example, this portfolio, is, I think, a great way of demonstrating your work. It really is. Even more so in the creative industries. I was reading a LinkedIn post only yesterday, right? And I'm filming this in November 2025, where someone was talking around the fact that the whole interview process was just around them showcasing a piece of work. Now, there was a byproduct of some plagiarism, right? Where the organization maybe took those ideas or were heavily influenced by those ideas, didn't give the person a job, and then went off with it. But I think the general principle here is that it's almost a case of showing the work you can do, showing the actual examples of the pieces of work, rather than almost writing down what you're doing. It's almost a case of, well, I'm not going to tell you the detailed analysis of how I play the violin. I'm going to play the violin, and this is an example that's used in the Buckland report. So this showcasing of your skills and showcasing of your talents, I think, is really important. So hopefully we'll start to see that become a little bit more mainstream as well. There's also, of course, video submissions. So a lot of individuals, and I would put myself in this instance, because I don't mind talking on camera, would prefer to do video submissions, right, or verbal submissions, be it a recording or something like that. You think about the way people take in information now on YouTube and podcasts, etc. It feels quite natural to then try and translate that to an option for an application. Now, this isn't for everyone, right? And I totally understand that. And I think it's about these options and these flexibility, which is quite important. So again, particularly if you're given the opportunity to send something that you can have a script in front of you and you can have your ideas there, it's a great way of showcasing, talking about your skills. And also in these instances, and again, I realize this isn't for everyone, your passion can come through, right? It really can. But the idea really is that you're demonstrating your skills, right? The other thing I've seen is where organizations are sometimes sending out questions that people will answer, specifically those questions for the video submission. And it's obviously a way of trying to make it a little bit more streamlined on the organization side, right? So you think a manager can have these up there, they don't have to read through loads of CVs, they can get a sense of who the individual is, etc. Now, of course, we want to focus on skills, and it's very, very important. So these, as long as the questions are around the skills, I think that's a great idea. But the idea of video submissions is one that's developing. So again, it hopefully will become a more mainstream option going forward. Something else is course of case studies, right? So I know when I've applied for sort of relatively senior roles in the past, I've had to take case studies in or examples of pieces of work, and you're almost telling a story of a particular client or particular scenario you worked in. And it's not always just about the results. Some of the case studies I used to use were ones where it failed, but it's about what you've learned from. And I think organizations, again, will lean on this and should be leaning on this a lot more during the qualification period. Now, I would suggest that sometimes case studies supplement the sort of high level information you get within obviously the CV, where you have your job title, you have a brief summary of your role, and then you have a few projects, and then the organization that you're interviewing for may ask for a case study in relation to one of those projects or pieces of work, etc. But looking at this, I like the idea of having case studies, and it's one suggestion I would definitely give to any of our community that are building up an application portfolio of pieces of work, etc., is to have these case studies ready, have them to one side, etc. Use AI to help generate the core information, etc., and get them fine-tuned. But having a particular project, piece of work, scenario, whatever it is, right? It can be that you were sort of promoted into a team leader position in your local retailer, and how you navigated that process and some of the changes and influences you made, etc. Very, very important. Another one would be the skills-based or work sample assessments. Again, so these are almost like work trials, right? Where you sometimes go in and you might do a piece of work for a couple of hours just to see how you get on with the job, and particularly in the service industry, etc. This is, I wouldn't say it's common, but it's we do see it. And I think it's important when you see all of this to think, okay, this is, again, you could argue, quite an equitable way, a neuro-inclusive way of looking at the process. So rather than someone having to articulate what they can do, again, or trying to put it on a piece of paper, they actually can show what they can do, right? And I used to do this as a manager all the time, right? You try to show people the way to do things as opposed to tell them. And I think in this instance, it's the reverse, right? This is what I can do, and this is why I can do this job. And you're showing them the skills that you have during that. So those tasks and the services that you can do that relate directly to that job, it can be very, very important. And again, when we're looking at jobs where there isn't a massive long interview process, right? And as I say, it's maybe a local store or a local business where they want to get a sense of someone who can hit the ground running in a particular role, or it's a skill that you have and you need to demonstrate it. It's very important. Goes back to what I was saying earlier around the playing the violin as opposed to writing down how you play the violin. Very, very important. So these work sample assessments can be quite important. Something else would be in alternative interview formats are things like these pre-submitted questions. So providing the interview question in advance, so people can have a structure and can start to prepare for these interviews in obviously prior to actually going in there. Where this is important for me is it reduces a lot of anxiety, and you actually get the information you want. It doesn't turn into a sort of a memory recall exercise. I realize that there's various things sometimes during an interview that you do want to ask in real time, right? But I would suggest you get the best responses if the candidate is relaxed and feels natural and is obviously not in a sort of stress state or anything like that. So trying to be equitable and giving questions in advance can be important. What I have also seen is where people can provide written answers to the questions in advance prior to the interview. And it's a great starting point outside of the CV, because the CV, if you really think about it, is quite one way, right? It's a case of a candidate saying, this is what I can do. And there's a lot of information on there that the organization may not need. If the organization sends questions in advance that you can answer by sort of writing them out and emailing them across, then suddenly there's a starting point of a conversation that's a lot more tailored to that job. So again, this is something that we feel is pretty neuro-inclusive going forward, because you're getting the organization's getting the answers that they're looking for, and the job seeker is obviously doing this and delivering this in a way which is probably a lot more neuro-inclusive. Something else under alternative interview formats would be these written or text-based interviews. So conducting the interview via written responses or instant messaging format. So we've talked about sending information in advance, but what about doing an interview over WhatsApp, right? Or doing an interview over email, or doing an interview over any type of chat function, say on Teams, etc. Again, this takes away the emphasis around eye contact, body language, and verbal communication. And I think what I like about this is that it's an option, right? So I would be recommending to organizations that this is done as maybe part of the whole interview process. I would say that most organizations would like to meet the person in some way that they're going to be working with, right? And it's going to be working for them. But when you're looking at the parts that focus specifically around skills and specifically around certain Q&As, etc., then this could be an option. It really could. The challenge with this is that it's a little bit like you ask a question, then someone's got to type out the answer, then they reply, then they've got to type out a response, and it can be a little bit clunky, right? But again, it's definitely an option. Where we're probably seeing some progress on this is a great tool from a friend of mine called Braided Meetings. So Rob looks after an organization called Braided Communications. Braided Meetings and Braided Interviews are two products within that, and the way it works and is really interesting. It's almost like a sort of a real-time carousel of questions. So the best way I can explain it is that imagine almost like a sort of a four-sided cube, and each side of the cube has a question. Basically, the question is asked on one side of the cube while you're answering another question on another side of the cube. So the interviewer will set up 4 questions to start. You will answer one. As that goes round, you then answer the second one. While you're doing that, the interviewer is responding to the first question that you've answered. And it works like this in a linear way. So the idea really is that you're both answering and doing things at all times, right? Now, it does rely on the fact that you have to have these pre-built questions, but it is very, very, very neuro-inclusive. It really is, and it's very time efficient as well. And Rob's story with Braided is that this has been built to reduce or give take away the idea of time challenges and latency when traveling in space, right? So there's a delay sometimes in communication, and this can hide that sort of time delay by, again, having a series of questions that are being answered, and it gives the illusion of real time. In this instance, it's very neuro-inclusive because it means that you are able to take your time, answer your questions, etc. Now, there is a bit of a time limit on it, but can be adjusted to be as neuro-inclusive and as much as you want. But the whole idea is that it gives a good time control and a good process and a good format and structure to the entire interview process. So just check it out, have a look at it. I know if you're interested, Rob will always give you a free license to play around with it for a couple of days, etc. as well. But again, can be something that can be quite interesting. So braided, one of those areas and tools that's quite progressive. So next steps, right? Obviously, this will be in our webinar collection, of course, where you can ask questions, etc. In this instance, you can ask questions by typing them out, but you can also DM us and as well. But if you do want a video meeting, just give me a shout as well. So we want to be as inclusive as possible on this one. But I'd love to know anything from our community about anything where you've been quite pleasantly surprised by a different way of applying for a job, or and how you've applied for that role, and like, wow, that's interesting. It means I haven't got to send my CV. I send a video. I can send this. I've seen some areas, maybe in the gaming industry, where you send an idea for a game, or you send a sort of a synopsis of your favorite game, etc. as well. I think there's some areas like gaming and creative industries are a little bit more progressive in this instance. So, but yeah, love to know some ideas, love to know some thoughts, because I think it's a developing area. It really is. And I think it's almost like the next step in the evolution of trying to be neuro-inclusive. We've had these processes where reasonable adjustments, the idea of them is becoming a lot more mainstream within companies now. So getting extra time and questions in advance and a few other things. If we can now change the way people are applying for jobs or start to look at that, then I think that's a really interesting area to focus on. So thank you so much for watching today. Hope you've enjoyed the webinar and it's got everyone thinking. Any questions, give me a shout. But if not, I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, comment, share and subscribe, and scan the QR code to join the Diversa Connect community.